Okay, today is Thursday, June 5th, 2025. It's 4:23. I'm going to call this meeting of the Long-Term Building Committee to order, and I'd ask everyone to stand for the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you very much, everyone. So, pursuant to Governor Healy's approved legislation, H62, a bill extending authorizations for all local boards, commissions, and committees to hold public meetings remotely or in a hybrid extended timeline, amending Section 30A of Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, most recently amended by Section 40 of Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, and replacing the current expiration date of March 31st, 2025 with June 30th, 2027. This is a hybrid meeting under MGL Chapter 30, Section 20, Chapter 30A, Section 20F. This meeting is being recorded. So first of all, we're going to have an opportunity for public comment, if there's any comment from our public at the moment. Hearing none, we'll move on to the discussion items. So the first item on the agenda here, I just had a discussion and review of the process integrity, informal engagements, and impacts on the current feasibility study. And before we move forward with tonight's agenda with RGB, I just wanted to take a moment to address. I did receive an email from our planning board rep that there was an informal meeting that took place with between some members of this committee, the Affordable Housing Task Force, and other architects and developers regarding potential housing uses for the old high school. I did want to just mention that under the RFP that was sent out for this study, and as I recall, the vote of the Long-Term Building Committee, which resolved to study the potential use of the building for municipal use, that was given to the Select Board, which then turned into the RFP, which now turns into the study that we're doing here today. The scope of work was very specific and did not necessarily include the housing option. So what I just wanted to make clear here is that I think it wouldn't be fair to add in another element beyond the scope of work that was agreed to and contracted with RGB at this time. Now, that being said, if the Planning Department, Housing, Affordable Housing Trust, anyone else wants to do something, any other type of study and send that to the Select Board, because ultimately it is a Select Board's decision and the voters of Westport as to what's to be done. That's certainly no issue there. But I think in terms of the purview of this committee, the scope of work was very specific and very clear. And I just wanted to make sure that everyone is in alliance with that. So,
about that?
Sure, absolutely.
I must admit, I'm confused. Maybe I didn't pay attention. I thought their charge was much more expensive to take a look at that school and at least consider alternatives to it, not just municipal. Municipal was only one of them. Am I wrong about that?
So, as a matter of fact, I can pull up right now because I just sent it to our newest committee member, Mr. Reese. And by the way, I was remiss to not allow you a moment to introduce yourself. As soon as we get past this, I'll certainly get back to that. But I did just send the RFP that was sent out originally, and this was the date of release was September the 6th, I believe, or thereabouts in 2024, and the scope of work specifically states, scope of work will include the following: a detailed analysis of existing conditions of the old high school. It gives a list of the reports previously done. Number two, a general analysis of existing conditions of the Town Hall Annex, Town Hall, and the Council on Aging buildings. Identify existing spatial use of the buildings and municipal needs. Identify short-term and long-term improvements with cost estimates. Number three, public outreach and education to be an important part of the study. Number four, and this is the key here, evaluate various options such as demolishing the high school, demolish the high school and build a new municipal facility, moving annex offices to the old high school, moving annex town hall and council on aging to the old high school, rehab existing town hall and build addition to include offices for the town hall annex. And each option should include associated costs and conceptual plans, final report with conceptual plans, estimated costs and pros and cons. So it does say, including but not limited to these items. But my concern is it wasn't in the scope that was I guess agreed upon with RGB to begin with. So
Good question to ask them, how you interpreted that direction.
Well, we did the same thing. We looked at the scope of work, and that's what we based our price on. So certainly we can do that. If you want us to add that, we can add it. And
I guess my question is, have you looked at other options other than
so one of our tasks was to look at the other studies that were done and performed, and one of those were by, I believe it was a firm called Util, and Util did a study on housing. So that was one of the things we looked at. So I remember a clear direction that we weren't going to repeat someone else's work that they did. We were going to look at something different. So that's how I interpreted it. But like I said, we can piggyback that along if need be. If wanted. We did review the study by Util. We do have comments on that if we want to go into that. I know you reviewed it and you had some comments and some concerns. So we did kind of, on myself in the review and the study of all the other studies. I mean, we would be remiss if we weren't including the studies that someone else did, or the town had 3 or 4 of them that they had done in the past, and not review them, and then give you guys the same information again. So we wanted this one to be a little bit different.
So I guess I feel very strongly that the scope of work that has been performed up to this moment and is going forward, I mean, we're deep into this study right now. I think ultimately, as I said previously, the select board and the voters of Westport are going to have the final say. So I think if there was to be action by either the planning department or the Affordable Housing Trust to add in an option for a discussion of housing, at this time, it seems to me that should be a separate thing from what the Long-Term Building Committee is doing, because our charge was very specific this time around. So that's my feelings on the matter. I certainly would ask if anyone else from the committee has any comments or on this at this time. So
Well, I was going to say,
if
we haven't shared yet what we brought this evening, which are options. I think the number one option that we're going to look at is the way the building is now, right? Number 2 option is how you, and so in that number 1 option, it's going to show you the amount of space in the building that's not utilized, right? Not currently used. And again, this is a huge complex, right? So within our options, and this is Mason, sorry, I should have introduced him, Mason Lance, one of our colleagues at RGB, and he's been helping with a lot of the graphics and the development of this. So if I talk about Mason, I'm not talking about bricks. So anyway, getting back to that, there's a lot of space. So if by chance the discussion is we flip or reuse a portion of the building in a different way, I believe there's still some opportunity to put some housing. It's not a total housing block, but there's multiple components within this building. And again, we have some options this evening to show you that maybe that works into that configuration. Maybe it is, it could be senior housing, it could be workforce development housing, it might be, so again, it all depends on how. The only one issue that I really see with that is no different than, again, what we'll share with you. When we get into housing, we're going to look at increasing in load on septic and plumbing and the infrastructural needs that that's going to take. And that's really no different than the town hall and annex either. But the number of people we increase and put in that building, the number of those systems are going to go up. So be aware of that.
Yeah, there's certain regulations that if you have so many gallons, it becomes, you need to add grinders, becomes a water treatment facility by code. That may take you out of the realm of having a well on site and having septic on site. It may go to force you to public water and public sewer for the density of it you're creating.
Yeah, which you don't have.
Which we don't have, right?
Yeah, so that doesn't,
So we tried to, we're familiar that a bond had failed in the past to bring water and sewer down the street to connect. So we are familiar with that failure. I mean, we can solicit the bond again. You can always go ask voters to do it again. That's always an object. It's not a bad idea. It's actually a good idea to have public utilities in the outside. It makes the land more valuable for development in and about that area. And it also is more conducive to housing, multiple housing.
So I think the other thing that I really want to make sure everybody considers is we have had a public meeting, well, obviously all of these meetings are public, but we've had a major public meeting, a very well-attended public meeting during this study. And the sentiment, I think, was very clear from the attendees. I don't remember the exact number, but it was a decent turnout. Might have been more than made it to town meeting this year. The sentiment was, by and large, how can we use this building for municipal use, whether it's council on aging, whether it's availability for athletics. I mean, it seems to me that the public has made their thoughts pretty clear at this time. Now, that being said, I want to make it clear that I'm not opposed to other options being presented to the select board outside of this study. I just don't necessarily think it's fair to throw that entire component in terms of the discussion of where it fits in with what you all have already been working on and talking about multiple different uses for different parts of the building. That makes sense, but I didn't necessarily want to throw in the entire the entire housing thing all into this at once. So, yes, ma'am. Yes, Ms. Wheeler.
Yes. I'm not on the committee, but I just wanted to say, I also felt, didn't you feel that folks at the April 10th meeting also wanted kind of like a community space? I felt like there was
absolutely.
maybe a discussion on Council of Aging, but they were also talking about like youth recreation and stuff. So I was wondering if you felt that was also a takeaway from the community, that they wanted this kind of like community center that could be shared maybe.
Indeed, and perhaps
Including the arts. I mean, I think
Yes,
arts,
yes.
athletics,
Yes,
senior facilities. right.
yes.
I think the more accurate term I should use is almost a civic civic
yes.
use as opposed to municipal use. So municipal use being part of that component, but certainly that was my takeaway, and I believe there is certainly plans to have an additional meeting on this too. So. So that was all. I just wanted to touch on that note before we got into the presentation. If anyone else from the committee wishes to speak, please. All right, no worries. So very quickly, I'm going to take just a moment. We do have a new committee member, Mr. Edward Reese. I'm very happy to have you aboard. I know it took a little while. You've been expressing some interest for quite some time. So thank you and welcome to the committee. And please feel
Thank
free to
you.
introduce yourself.
I'm not a longtime resident. I've only been here 5 years, which makes me a newcomer. And I have no experience on reuse of schools. But I spent 18 years with Digital Equipment running their worldwide real estate, the leasing, the construction. So I know contracting practices and how to get from A to B. Well, I don't know if I know how to get us from A to B, but I know how to get computer buildings from A to B. So I'm looking forward to seeing if I can be useful in this process, and thank you for the opportunity.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your interest and for joining us here. So with that, we can get into the presentation by RGV.
So
And thank you.
I'll start off, and I'll hand it to these two gentlemen to my right. I will say, when we met with the public back in March, we had proposed at that time potentially some retail going into that space to bring some of the tax dollars back, and that wasn't looked upon too favorably. In fact, they didn't want any retail at that point, and they wanted to focus more on, I think like Diaz said, more community, and they termed it,
Community campus,
what you guys termed one of the schemes to be a community campus scheme.
right.
So we were charged with initially three type of directions. As Andrew alluded to earlier, the first one would be, obviously, do nothing. And what does it cost to do nothing? Second thing would be to develop that into the existing space. So you have an existing envelope. How do you develop it into the space you have with the particulars you have? And the third one was create a campus around that the community could all benefit from that. And that campus would have different buildings on it and segmented using that same skeleton. And then the fourth one we just told was to look at the town hall, the existing town hall, about potentially putting an addition onto the town hall. So we looked at all four of those. RGB's, we've recently did a white paper on repurposing old school buildings. And it was premised on this one and a couple of other ones that we have going on right now. And whenever you want to take a building down, so we don't have an estimate for that tonight. We do have a back of an envelope estimate, and by the final one, we'll have that one all ironed out. But we estimate roughly about $3.5 million to take it down. Whenever you have to take a building down, you have to put something up in its place. You still have to pour a foundation. You still have structure. Everyone knows the news. The tariffs went up 50% for steel alone. So what's important is you want to keep the skeleton, the bones of the structure as much as you can. That's by far a cost. It's not all the cost in the building, but it's a lot of the cost of the building. So to take it down and build something up would kind of be throwing bad money after good. So we would rather see you modify the structure, keep the structure, and repurpose the building so you get the most out of the biggest bang. After all, if you have to do, or you do have to go out for a bond, it's all based on money and how much people can absorb in their taxes as a result of the bond going ahead. So we try to minimize that cost and try to mitigate those issues by salvaging some of those. So without further ado, I kind of skipped on most of it, but if you want to go to the first slide, it talks exactly about that meeting we had. And these are what came out of that meeting.
So, yeah, that evening, the major bullet points, I think, at least that we left with, there's definitely a lot of interest in the Council on Aging and their involvement and their desire to use the building if they can and to have more space if they could. That made a lot of sense. I heard after the meeting, I had a number approach and talk about, we don't really foresee business, like small businesses are gonna have a difficult way of moving in here, so we didn't see that as being really that viable. There was a lot of comments about, we have a farmer's market, it could be expanded, could you find a place for that? We have a food bank in town that's small and sort of tasked, but it's a great program. We should include that or increase that capability. We looked at there was a lot of interest in the rec department and after school sort of sports space use. We recognize that the fields behind the building of the school now are gonna stay and need to stay. We also realized that there was one comment that the EMS maybe is not something that could go there, that they maybe don't have a need for that. But the concept of having an urgent care facility potentially could move in here. There was interest in the Council on the Arts, keeping the theater, if at all possible, that could be used, and there's interest in finding someone who either A, could lease it, or can the school expand to use it in a more thorough way, or the town itself, because that's for town meetings, and that was a useful thing to have. I can't read it from here, but that was kind of youth and recreation. Oh, and the school department, the after school for the young students, like having the opportunity. The school's facilities departments there, they would like to continue to have a space, and I believe they're allowed to use that space because of the selectmen. I've allowed them to go in and use the space as it currently is, but they'd love to have more space to be able to do. So those are all kind of the positive things. I think we solved that. So that was what we used to move forward in terms of our options, our proposals of the reuse of the building. So we could go to the next one. Yeah, same thing. I know we were talking about what would it, the price to do these things, what would be the outcome. There's definitely a public sentiment. The community wants to keep the building in some facsimile and would like it to become a viable, useful part of Westport, not just remain sort of sitting there underutilized. So that, we did talk about ADA compliance a little bit. There's some discussion on that. There's some discussion on how much is it going to cost to really upgrade this building, to bring it to life safety and code condition. And that's something that's very real and should be, or we factored that into this in terms of cost. Make it larger? I don't know.
You hit the shift button, and with the wheel or your mouse, you can make the screen larger. Should get power to this.
So,
4.0.
just not showing up well? Or?
It's an extension cord in the back, power cord in the back. So we would also look at the ADA compliance.
Yeah.
So when you look at a building, this first, okay, former high school program. So this is what exists now as far as a program. Building was built in the 50s with a couple of additions onto it. So it's what they call an existing non-conforming use as far as the building code on it. So there's a lot of amenities. If you were to bring the public back in to this building, you'd have to bring it up to code. If you don't, you obviously share a liability, or if someone has, the town would have that liability if something were to happen, whether it be an internal accident or a fire or something like that.
Just a clarification.
Sure.
Because it came up several times in that meeting. People said, why can't we just use it as it is? And you're saying that even using it in its current condition, for its current or historic use, is non-compliant?
That's correct. So there's a lot of systems in there that are just antiquated, that don't work anymore,
Yeah.
and you need to do maintenance on it to bring it up to date. For example, the kitchen. The kitchen it may have been a good kitchen at the time. It needs a little bit of,
But are there code issues that would have to be addressed if we used it as a school? We're not suggesting a school. but-
absolutely, because it's been vacated and you repurpose it as a school again, it would have to comply with the newest code of the schools.
Okay.
Fire code, building code, ADA code.
Change
all
of
which-
use or occupancy, we're getting into like exactly whatever that program becomes, right? So,
So there would be some things to get that. I mean, you've been using the facility. We had heard that the senior center kind of moved their way in and started using some of those spaces. There is an element of liability there for the town that they take that without doing further studies to find out what needs to be compliant.
But how about the current use, like, so it's currently used for after-school
yeah.
daycare program currently. So that's also non-compliant currently?
Well, we know, for example, the egress doors don't comply.
Right,
So you have
okay.
panic hardware that don't comply. Something as simple as that doesn't
Okay.
comply, that they still use the doors, they still open up.
Right,
But in a modern-day code, they don't allow. The older egress doors would have, if you remember, the bars that went down.
right.
And the thought was that if you had a rush of people going out there, someone puts their arm in, it prevents the door from opening. That's why the new panic bars are bar type, so that a mass
Just
can
push-
push against
push,
it and opens the door. Stuff like
Gotcha,
that
okay.
would comply. But you continue to use that space now, so if we were to propose another use, the first thing you would do is you'd look at the code.
What's your opinion of what's going on right now? We have, as far as I understand, we have some daycare, right? And we have something run by the Council on Aging, I'm not sure what it is, but you got people in there. In a building that, I'm a retired architect, so I know just enough to be dangerous about this.
You know what a building code is, though.
But I know the building fire alarm system
Yeah.
is probably not up to code. It's
Right.
not sprinkled.
Right.
The egress requirements probably aren't met, bathrooms, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So my question to you, as architects and our consultants, should we be using it now?
So it's strictly our opinion. When we had heard that the senior center was taking that space, we did let the chairman know that it was a surprise to us that they did that, and it would, it'd be hard to, they could do whatever they want. You can do, it's your town, you can do what you want. It's not my job to tell you can't do what you want, but I could tell you that if it doesn't meet code and someone does get hurt, there's a liability there for the town. So that's what I can tell you for a fact. There's quick issues. You mentioned the fire alarm. It has to be an addressable fire alarm. ADA, you have to have horn and strobes inside the toilet areas, so that if you're in the toilet for some reason, the fire alarm goes off and you're hard of hearing, there should be a strobe in there to let you know there's a fire in the building. If there isn't done and there is something like that that happens, are you liable? Yeah, the town is liable for that.
And there's probably, John, what you also, the way it's used right now, it's, by square footage, it's huge, right? So maybe you have 15 people in there. So by default, you probably are okay, probably, because you don't have a capacity of 600 students in there. It's nowhere used, so your egress that you have, yes, there are multiple ways out. So by your local AHJ or fire marshal is probably allow it because he realizes that it's only 10, 15, 20 people per day in that space, in the whole building. So the likelihood of someone being trapped in there or caught in a chance of a fire, I mean, again, I'm making this up. I don't know what his take
It's
is.
an interesting argument, because I thought about this originally,
Yeah.
and I said, oh my God. But then I thought about every other school in town,
Right,
which I guarantee you are all not up to present codes.
yeah.
So,
Probably most elementary schools that you guys.
yeah, there's a non-conforming, existing non-conforming act that if you're in a school, ADA, you're supposed to change it over. Building and fire codes, unless it's mandated from the beginning, they will allow it to be that way until they change the use or do any kind of modifications to it. In this case, you've vacated the school, now you're reoccupying the school again, so that would typically trigger code
You got other
enforcement to
things,
do
but
that.
here's my question to
Yeah.
think about. We know we have a building that's far something, but we also would like to use it.
Yeah.
So have you thought about the bare minimum kinds of code enhancements that would be necessary to feel more comfortable using it?
Yes, we've got in our cost estimates, one of our estimates.
Good.
Is to do that, is to look at that building, to utilize that. Matter of fact, some of the cost to bring the building up to par, adds up because of the size of the building. So that alone, if you were to change the windows, there's a lot of windows on that building. It's not just a few windows, you'd have to change all the windows in the building.
But can you do it in phases? I mean, so if there were a plan to utilize 40% of the building for offices, council on aging, we'll just say that takes up 60,000, 70,000 square feet. Is there a way to segregate the building enough sufficiently
Sure.
so that maybe the power plant would be enough for the whole building, but you could code
Yeah,
it in sections?
fire alarm would be the entire building. Whether or not any suppression system would be the entire building. But you could block off certain areas of the
Right.
building for egress.
Okay.
And redirect them for that area. That would
Okay.
definitely reduce the cost for you,
Yeah.
wouldn't have to do the whole building.
Right.
So the one thing I wanted to mention, as far as the non-conforming use, I know that, to the best of my knowledge, the out-of-school time program is technically, that's the daycare, as you said, it's been, that occupied pretty much, I believe, right after, or right at the same time that the facility was still being used as a school, so that's just been maintained there, as well as the administrative offices. I do have a little concern with the Council on Aging using the facility right now as it sits. I understand the need for space specifically, I think the exercise groups and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, I do have a little concern that gets beyond even the non-conforming use issues.
Chair,
so.
just a point of clarification. Are we listening to a PowerPoint first?
Yeah, sorry.
I was just about to say, let's
jumped into
keep
Q&A,
going and, yeah,
And we haven't heard the PowerPoint yet.
let's let them
Or seen
present
the PowerPoint.
and we'll go from there. Thank you.
We're finished. We have 40 slides.
How was
Yeah,
that?
we gotta go. So,
No worries.
So we would,
we're gonna get-
we're gonna try to do ultimately we do a a benefit analysis. And what that does is, it looks at the cost and how you retrieve it back for your existing conditions. Is it worth saving? Is it not worth saving? If it is worth saving, what is the cost? And what is the benefit of that cost? In other words, is the dollars you're putting into it worth the dollars you're putting into it, opposed to what you're gonna get back out of it? So we'll do that as we surmise it at the end, and we're almost there now. Okay? We do an ADA compliance study, all that stuff will be incorporated into that,
Yeah.
into that final study, and I believe that's the question that you had at one point, Ed, when you had asked, can something be done or has any work been done to look at the existing conditions as they are. So that's certainly coming. We wanted to stick to these schemes, to develop these schemes, to try to give you a number in the different schemes, because ultimately what we'd like to get out of this committee tonight is a further direction, so that we can finalize this report with the direction from the committee. So we're going to give you these options as they go on here now. So what do you say, 40 slides? We can go through
Yeah,
these.
so this, again, there's a number of slides, but this is explaining the concept that I've been working toward is that, or all of us, is that if we have another community session, how do you make this something that's legible to a greater, public? So how the building is used now, if you know how it's used, I mean, just identifying the spaces within. We're not gonna have to go too far down in that, but mechanical, electrical, former classrooms, the space that was the cafeteria, the space that is the auditorium, the space that was the basketball gym and the library. So we could probably move through some of them pretty quickly,
Yeah.
but that's what this,
So before we go on, I want to just explain how the chassis works. So there was a lot of slides and different schemes, so you wouldn't get confused. You go through one scheme all the way to the end, second scheme all the way in, third and the fourth, and then you summarize it at the end with some of the cost models. Okay, so we can go back if you need us to
Yeah.
go back. So you're worried about-
And I will mention, this has been forwarded to all members of the committee at this time, so.
Good, next slide.
those are the options.
These are the options we talked about earlier, right? So really, to capture those, no action taken, adaptive reuse of the existing space, community campus, to make it part of different components. We'll get into little details, and the fourth one is the addition onto the town hall. So no action taken.
Oh, so this is basically showing a diagram of the existing school and actually the spaces that are being used temporary or now, and then what's not being used. So the gray is 90,000 square feet, 91,000 square feet, using 21,000 square feet of a 150,000 square foot complex. So it's pretty self-explanatory.
The danger,
Does that include the council on aging and
No.
daycare and that?
No.
So it's not.
It
This-
includes the,
You have to,
After school, yes.
yes, yeah,
can we also use the word after-school care? Because
yeah, it's not daycare.
daycare has a bunch of.
Yeah, it's, out of school
After school
time is, OST is how we,
we didn't
Yeah.
know, John, how many people were in there. We didn't know what the area they would take in. This all came to us new. So if you have that information, we'll gladly put it in
I
that.
don't have it, I just know it's there.
I have one question. The square footage, you're saying 91 not used, 21 used, 22 used. That only comes up to about 112, 120. But isn't it about 150 or so, 160?
yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So why is there a difference when
There's
not
a-
used versus
We
used?
call miscellaneous spaces, spaces like the boiler room. the
Okay,
chemical room,
all right,
all those.
okay.
Corridors,
That's, I just want to make
yeah,
sure I
you-
understood that.
yeah.
Okay,
These are an actual net,
Circulation as well.
yeah.
that's fine.
So some of the things you gotta look at, no action taken is, right now, I believe the number was roughly $350,000 to $400,000 a year it cost you to maintain the building. That's only gonna get more expensive, just in attrition, but also more expensive as time deteriorates the structure and nothing's done to the structure. So there's certain things, like, for example, when you walk into the main columns, they're rotted on the bottom. You go so far before they become hazardous at that point, and they may fall on someone, so then you'll have to tape them off, and then it becomes a burden to the town, one way or the other. So this cost per year is only to keep the lights on. It doesn't address other things. And you can't just occupy some of the building. If you mothball the area, the 90,000 square feet rather, that isn't used, and you don't heat it, or you don't condition it, the other things will happen to the inside of the building, like mold will occur. And once that takes over, then there's mold mitigation, that's more money. It'll cost you, and it'll stop backing up on you.
And this building's not set up that way, right?
Right.
It was set up to be occupied and used. Yes, you can compartmentalize it, but what happens once you do
the climate zones are not
those zones? Yeah.
very, yeah. that
All
don't
on,
make
all
sense,
off,
so.
yeah. Like, if you look in this diagram, the white is the corridors.
Right.
Strictly speaking, if some of the corridor isn't occupied, some of the corridor is occupied, what do you prevent that child or that person from going to that area? Is there an area that you lock off? Is there a hazardous area in that other area? Not a hazardous chemical, but a hazardous area. Someone could get tripped up, someone could get cut, some kind of injury can happen, so usually block that off. That isn't taken into effect. If you do block it off, does that then ruin one of your means of egress out of the building? Because this building is designed as a single loaded corridor with exits on either side. That's what it was always designed as. Once you chop it in half, now you're going to recreate that exit on the other half, or provide that exit from somehow, and that doesn't exist on this building here. So simply doing nothing will continually cost you money, and even more than that, and it'll raise your liability claim or potential liability issues for the town, short-term and long-term. There it is.
Reiterating the
I
same
should read this
thing.
before I speak, it'd be less for me to speak.
Is one of the costs, the cost that would have to be spent here at the town hall and the annex, if they don't move, where are those costs?
So we did that during the public presentation, we factored that in of how much it was cost. I believe it was $100 and change to keep the town hall going, and we factored that in the
But
development.
are there capital improvements that need to be made? Are those showing up in this do-nothing budget?
No, they're currently not.
Shouldn't
They will
they?
be, they will be.
They will be, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
So again, this, tonight is a progress of where we were,
Okay.
and we're about 90% there. We wanted
I
to get.
just want to make sure we're of the same mind.
Yeah, we wanted to get some feedback, okay? So these are some of the existing spaces, not used in the second and basement floor level, the auditorium not used, and the cafeteria kitchen not used. Great spaces, just not utilized. And again, these will get worse and worse as time goes on if they're not heated right, ventilated right, or as designed. This is option 2. Want to talk a little bit about option 2?
So option 2 is maintaining the building sort of as is. We're demoing just a small portion or in the front, which I think if people call the connector or the bridge, to provide access. So the concept here is to try and insert the components that we're looking at, like the town hall, the annex. We maintain the auditorium. We increase the after-school program. We provide more or improve the rec department and the access for sports, internal sports. We increase space for, or provide space for council on aging. We put in the lower level in urgent care, took a space for urgent care. Again, if it comes, if it doesn't, that's okay. It's just, there's another opportunity to do something with that space. We had an indoor market, which is adjacent to what would be an expanded farmer's market, out on the green, on the lawn, on the backside. And then mechanical and support spaces, you're gonna need them. Right now, we kind of kept them in the general area that they are, but we know that any improvement to any of these spaces is gonna cost money and infrastructural improvements that'll have to take place. So this is adaptive reuse of the building as we see it now, without any,
Very quick question.
Yeah.
I noticed, so the demolition zone that you have on here is literally just that connector, so it would open up the courtyard there. Is there something, is there anything specific about that part structurally that is in
No.
question, or is it just?
well, and in some ways, yes. So you want to maintain your elevator core and your stairs, but it limits you in terms of access into other spaces. So if you want to give Council on Aging their own entry, then they have that. Town Hall, they have their own entry.
Understood.
School and sports facility, so it comes in a later, again, we
Gotcha.
overtalk, but points of entry and access to make it flow a little better. Because security-wise, you're not gonna come in one door to get to all
Everything,
those
right.
apartments, right?
Like you do now.
Yeah.
Right? So now you gotta run down the corridor that's unoccupied. So part of our cost, when we get to the end of the presentation, the cost for option 2 was to bring some of these spaces up to code
Yeah.
for egress, so that still make the place safe.
That was my question. How much do you have to bring it up to code to do this?
We'll put at the end, we'll show the cost. We have a breakdown, we have a total fee, but we have a further breakdown of,
Yeah.
as you know, John, I don't have plumbing drawings in this drawing to do a quick estimate, but we have cost estimators that looked at this, did a basic square foot cost,
Yep.
did a code analysis, so they knew, like, for example, that you would have to probably subdivide this thing in zones, where if you look at the middle diagram, where it says first floor, and there's a salmon color next to a dark gray color, That one would be a heated space, one wouldn't. You'd got to bring it up to at least 45 degrees, or the plaster walls would start cracking, blocks would start cracking. So there's different elements in there. Right now, you have one heating system, so there would have to be some kind of use of a secondary heating system or ventilating system to kind of control the variance of those temperatures. So you're not paying for heat in the area you're not using to the fullest extent. So you could still have the salmon color at 70 degrees while the other one's still 45 degrees. Currently, that's not designed that way mechanically or ventilation-wise.
One last question on this adaptive use. Would it also include some ample parking, particularly handicap parking? And
Yeah.
access to that? So that's been a big issue if, as you've gone to the
Yeah.
building.
Absolutely.
There's no easy parking for people
Right.
who have difficulty walking long distances.
So the next slide shows a
Okay,
Yeah, there's
all right, good,
Site, yeah.
To my point.
thank you.
It's all right.
So this shows adaptive reuse in number 2. Did you show the parking in this?
It's,
All right. Next
yeah.
one.
Yeah.
So you can see the added parking. This is number 2 with
Oh, yeah, good.
in front, and we did a basic 1 to 2. We looked at your zoning ordinance for parking, what's required. Simple square foot, if you design a parking lot for 300 square feet per car, it includes circulation. We did
Yeah.
decide the number of cars times the 300 to give it an area that we had to make up. So there is ample parking. We did have to add parking to the right near the fields, to the left near the gym. And of course, in the entry, we took some of those trees down, some of the grass down,
Right.
replanted some of those trees with islands to afford more parking there.
And we had to hold off on using the cemetery. Because one of the young guys in our office said, we'll just
there's
put the
that-
parking lot right here. I'm like, no, no, no. That's a cemetery.
You want to, Andrew, do you want to go over some of the, like the farmer's market, some of the outside,
yeah.
like the concession stand, some of the,
Yeah, so we put in a few, sort of, not improvements or amenities, like you use the sports and fields, there's there's potential to do like a concession stand and increase the parking a bit, and then we grab a playground in the back that goes for, say, the after-school, or the younger students, younger kids, and then the other section, we looked at a farmer's market, increasing that square footage and how it might be used, and so really it's just sort of a pass on the site, the exterior perimeter site conditions for this. No major, say, landscaping or site topography shifts, but some improvements on certain components, yeah.
now simply go back to the earlier question, not to get off topic, but if we were to look at a housing element in this plan, there is ample square footage, you could put in a housing element. If we're given direction to look at that, we can certainly look at that and fit that in and make it part of the element so it works with the site. Whether that be a separate area, so it's a little bit more private, than the more the public functions. So you're not bothered by a farmer's market on a Saturday afternoon when you're trying to sleep or take a nap or watch TV or something like that. So we would look at all that stuff, but you do, in this scheme, do have ample square footage to put another function or another use in this area.
Yeah.
This gives you some stats, you want to go over
Yeah.
this?
All right, Mason.
Yeah, this just shows, for some of the existing, town programs, how much space they would gain or, stay the same. So Council on Aging would get about 5,000 more square footage. Town Hall Annex would stay about the same, and the after-school program would be about 4,000 square feet added, so.
And these are all net usables rather than gross square feet?
They are usable square, so they are,
Yeah, they're net, they're
it's
less
net,
cars.
correct.
It's net.
But, and the only hesitancy of putting it out there is, it's like saying the town hall annex right now, you have, what do you have, 15 people in there? And, 8,000 square feet. They don't really use that effectively, so can they, could they live with less?
So this,
Probably.
you didn't reprogram to see how
No.
much they need. This is just moving their current.
Right, trying to look at, exactly, sort of the general that they have, if they keep it the same or similar, and then where could you increase?
Yeah.
Could they?
But I think it's fair to say things are going from the annex
Yes,
better,
Tell them you're going in less space.
yeah, but it would also, I mean, just the utilization of the space
More
would
efficient.
probably, it would be
A
much more
lot more
efficient.
efficient.
Yeah, so.
Take the senior center right now, it's very inefficient because it's 2 stories. They hardly ever use the lower story. And it's plagued by all these little rooms downstairs. So you have a little corridor, a pool table. This is a wide open space. So it'll appear as it's a lot more space because it's all utilized on one level. So no matter what disability you may have, what age you have, whether you're my age at 59 still in a senior center, or you're 89, you still be able to use it because it's one level, depending on what you want to do it. So it's open, it's an open slate right now. So these are developing concepts. So if you say, yeah, this is great, this is a great concept, you go to the next stage, you start developing that program. Start looking at program use. And you'll see in this next scheme how we start developing the outside, because we have that environment where you create a town and a city type center where you can create that stuff. Right now, you're plagued by the building being a mass, and you can only work around it. The next scheme takes it apart and work around it that way.
But even with this, there's still opportunity. So I think if we go to the next one, we did some concepts of, okay, this is what it looks like now. And if you were to envision as being something different and more, civic minded, okay, turn that into a performing arts center. Change the entry into it now. How does it effectively used? Is it more inviting? Again, these are just, what do you call them? Swags, but looks at how it might become. the next-
And they do a lot, because right now, what it does is it tells me there's an entrance there. And then necessarily, I don't have to go to the other side of the building to enter that building. So if I had a performing arts type event or a dance club event, I would go in here. It's very inviting for that way. So you can do small things to this area that you can really recreate different functions and different spaces around that existing.
Without radically changing the space. You're upgrading it, you're giving it like a facelift, but it's not we didn't destroy walls and move structure. We've added some, but it's ancillary, it's not.
And you'll see the numbers we put in the cost estimate, although they do require some aesthetics like you see in front of you, but a lot of the things you don't see, like the HVAC improvements and the egress and the code, all those things cost a lot of money, but they're creature comfort, creature safety, that makes the space a really nice inhabitable space. Because we believe the space right now is a really good space. It can be developed. This is your existing entry here, and we could change this to something like this.
Oh, there it is, yeah.
Okay, so that's still the same building, just treated a little bit different. Upgraded, gives you some pavers,
Took out the connector.
right, gives you some walking paths, so it's different, and you could have vendors on the outside on different events, selling hats, T-shirts, whatever they do on a vendoring type thing on this end of it. Another look here, this is option 2, look.
Yeah. That's where everyone goes in to vote currently, right? Now we're changing out the windows.
Right, so this is the after-school, right?
Yeah,
So now you're creating another entrance here. This entrance is for after-school. I'm not getting confused. I'm not going down there. I can now segregate my interior corridors, segregate the buildings, so I can have 2 distinct functions with plenty of parking around it for the
or in
scheme.
this case, 3 even, right? So, or 4, you can have, we're looking at the second floor being, what is that maybe for high school age or later, or after? Do you have a space for after school programs or a tech course or something like that, an extension space for that on the second floor where the younger children don't have to go, or students, right?
Again-
The sports to the left and, yeah. So,
Go, this end of the building, when you look at the cost, was new windows,
right.
new entries, new circulation egress, new fire alarm, new air condition, new heating, ventilations, all those, you may
But
have.
far less than having to recreate the internal structure.
Oh,
the
my God, if
steel,
you had to
right,
build this thing down and
right.
build it back up, plus the time frame on this thing is so less.
Right.
Time is money, right? And inflation keeps going. So if I can do this renovation in 8 months opposed to 16 months, then I've saved 8 months of inflation at 6% per year. So you save a lot of money, plus the materials themselves and the labor. Okay, so that brings you right to, and these can be done in phases. If the town doesn't want to absorb all this cost all at once, they don't have to, they can go in phases. You can do it segregated, and depending on what happens on phase 1, if it really gets a kick and people really are attracted, you may advance to phase 2 and phase 3 earlier, depending on the use. Some of the inside use, is this the Council
This
on
is
Aging?
Council on Aging, sort of looking into that. Basically, if you came in to where the little, that little diagram, but you came into the center, looking out over the back in the sports field. We don't have trees out there for soccer players, but the idea is that you're looking out over.
Come on, Mason.
We're trying to show them that there's an opportunity, you could have quiet study, you can have telemed spaces, you can have coffee time, you can have, it's an open plan. So however they lay that out or would like to use it, you can have a community space for multiple people, and they're not competing with the yoga class or the divider wall or the media center downstairs. It's upstairs, right there.
And Ed, to your point, this could all be programmed.
Right.
So if this program was for, let's say it's continuing ed for senior citizens, then it would be, you'd have computer labs in the back, and maybe you'd have some desks with some one-on-one, I don't know, speech therapist or whatnot. Or maybe you have some couches over there that look at a big screen to the left. We tried to open up some of the wall. The structure of the existing building is not a bearing block, it's a structure system, so you can open up a lot of elements and put glass to the outside. Beautiful, beautiful area looking out to the woods and to the field. And in a school where your focus is on the teacher, you're not supposed to put these big pieces of glass looking outside, right? But this is a different element. But
Right.
again, utilizing the same structure, the bulk of the cost of a building, you can retain that, and then you do these other elements to really open up that space and make it look nice.
An idea of what the town hall annex, an office space that's refreshed, that's open. Hopefully they have some more light. You're not in little cells.
Looking
one
good, Dia?
person.
Looks good to me.
So,
So right now in the annex, they do everything on petitions.
right.
So to have a private conversation, they have to all go into one room and close the room
Right.
versus the other ones. They got air conditioning units that are not the most efficient, hanging out the window, that there's air leakage coming in winter and summer. So this would all be fixed and you have a condition. This would all be a carpet tile. A carpet tile is a solution where if certain areas get stained, it can be removed relatively easy. It's not like a broad layer where it goes all down. Surfaces here would be designed for longevity, for durableness. You have working tables, open areas where the town halls typically work, where it's not so compartmentalized like it is now, inefficient. This also takes advantage of mechanical systems, which breed and function better when they're in an open space. When you have a compartmental space, you need more dampers, more ductwork, more controls. Those all add cost, where if you have a lot of open space, it's a communal space, you can control the flow of air a lot easier and inexpensively. These are.
Yeah, the idea of after school, or maybe the upstairs becomes a little bit older students. This is a maker space or type of environment that they can come in. If that was expanded, the program's expanded, you could offer that.
So what the 21st century education, as Andrew just alluded to in a makerspace it's the newest way of teaching children. Where we all went to school, we were taught one way. Look at the teacher in the front of the class and listen to what I'm saying. And some of us caught on and some of us didn't. I was one of those people that I liked movies because I could catch it a lot faster if I watched a movie than listen to a teacher, especially after lunch when I was falling asleep around 2 o'clock. So nowadays, what they teach you a little bit different, where they look at how the kids are taught, they teach them different ways and different skills. This could be one of those spaces. Kids would love to come to this space after school because of all the other beneficial use.
You're actually finding libraries now, and we're renovating a number of libraries, to add this as a teaching component within a library. Instead of having stacks of books, because most books are now virtual or online, taking that same space and converting it into a laboratory for multiple. So you have an older section that's quiet studies for people over 50, and you have high school teen room for the teens, and you have the younger children who can come in and use the library as a place to learn and hang out until mom and dad are home. So it's a safer place, it's a more interesting environment, and it's a way of reinventing a library, or reinventing a school. So we threw this in as an updated gymnasium, the rec department having a renovated, updated sports and athletic.
And this is nothing more, we're doing this actually in a school right now, it's nothing more than LED lighting, which makes it lighter. Right now, it's dimming light. It's stripping the coat that's right now on the floors and lightening it up a little bit. It's adding color to the walls through Tectum panels, so it's absorbed some of the sound. And it's adding some insignia elements on the other side, so it's more of a playful area. And this can create an area where you see the doors down on the end, where it's a separate egress and entrance. So it's a whole different area that could be brought into it. So naturally, if you're a child coming into the space, or even someone that does after-school, mid-30s, 40-year-olds that are doing activities and events after, it's an exciting place to be, and it can even be a conditions-type space. So days like today, you can go in there. That's where I would want to play basketball, not outside, and do it that way. And pickleball, whatnot, I know.
Well, that's coming too, so.
It's coming, all right, we're gonna get to that. So this is option 3. Kind of went ahead of it. This is option 3. Now, option 3, one of the things that we were told by people in the public meeting was to create that community campus. So we wanted to look at that as a scheme. So what you see here, you want to take this? Go.
Yeah, so Mason came in and he blew out big sections of your building. No, so the idea was sort of taking away square footage wherever it strategically could work to add opportunities for exterior spaces or open up to view and to light, reducing the square footage of the building that you have now, but saving the major components of it, and starts to, which, I think it has a lot of pros to it, because it literally becomes independent buildings, independent departments. So that's what this diagram is.
So right away, when you look at a diagram like this, you look at mechanical systems and you look at electrical systems, how they have to be operated separately, which increases the efficiency. So when the town hall closes at 4 o'clock, but yet the rec area is open till 10 or 11 o'clock at night, it's not using all the power from the other side of the building. It's very independent. You could do a photovoltaic on the roofs of these things to basically power themselves at that point, and it wouldn't be, aesthetically unpleasing. They have real nice systems now. So this was the premise of this idea. So again, using these same type of graphics, you want to go through this? This is what Andrew just said, to chopping it up. So they're very similar square footage. Now you're taking the non-utilized space, the underutilized space, and you're transferring it to be something useful to the town.
Yeah. So again, we have town hall and annex, sort of that orange in the center, using, again, the kind of the core that's there. Again, staying within the square footage, the gross square footage of each component. The school department, after-school department, first and second floor levels, which are that purple or lavender color. You have the pale pink, the rec department and athletic department, after weekend use as well, control, and I think the next plan maybe shows you how you come and go from it. But school facility stays in the back. That's what it would, a first pass of what it might look like. Your concessions, your farmer's market. We terrace down, so you have a pickleball close to the Council on Aging, but it's open to be used by others as well. You have an outdoor playground, and you have spaces as it sort of terraces down between the two buildings. So it's compartmentalizing in a sense, but using the bones of the building without destroying it completely. Keeping the things that are, say, maybe more costly in place.
Excuse me, would it be appropriate to ask here, what's the difference in usage of square footage between the previous scheme and this one?
Are they similar?
As far as total square footage
gross square
usage?
footage.
It is smaller.
Right,
like
by about how
we're
much?
Removing.
We'll take the underutilized.
So I have the benefit of having the presentation right in front of me. There is a breakdown at the
Okay,
end.
that's
Also,
why,
if we
if it's
can-
coming later, that's.
Yeah, no worries.
So on the
right.
Oh,
Yeah, good call, that too.
demoing about 25,000
Okay,
feet,
So what are you doing with that blank area? You utilize, as this drawing shows, for outside activities.
yeah.
So now you bring in outside activities, the area's not there. It gives you an opportunity to, again, stabilize or keep the existing structure without using that for additional cost, but you add a lot of elements to the outside and create different spaces on the outside. And again, this can be done in phases. You do phase one, it would be the right, phase two, you start with the town hall initially, and then you go to the to the left with the after-school events, and you go to the right for the
That's,
performing arts.
yeah, exactly, that's very true. This is, in a sense, far easier to phase because you know what you're focusing on, and the rest stays until you can, develop, say, the money or the funds for it. But the fight will be who gets to go first, right? So,
Isn't that the truth?
yeah.
So these are some of the site elements on this one. It's a lot busier because we're trying to bring more activity into this, making that really a community campus. So this thing is going from 8 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock in the morning, depending if you're, practicing soccer early or baseball early practice, and it goes till late at night, 10 o'clock at night. And you can have functions inside, outside. And the idea is it's always moving. It's really a campus place and something that the town can really be very proud of, adding this element to them. Same scenario here.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so we try to use the same square footage. We try to make them parallel except for the outside.
Yeah,
Same thing
you
on
see
this.
Sort of the same basic.
You're gonna see the same type of imagery on this thing.
This one's different. Because we actually
Separate.
cut out the
Right.
second, and that's subtle, but the center of that's gone now.
We'll see the other slides. If you look at the top right, you see a little red dot, that's
Yeah.
what you're looking at.
Yeah,
This looks similar.
It's
a little
very
different.
similar. Function will be different. He
You
cuts
see
back
how,
on the right,
we-
yeah.
We cut off the side going up to the second floor. and That's the space between the auditorium and what might become the town hall, which is the school entry now. That's the flat between the two.
So it still has a character of a municipal building, which we tried to keep and bring that into it, so it still looks like it functions, but it's adjacent right to that Council on Aging.
it brings the scale down a little bit,
Yeah,
it
you-
makes it,
Play with the
looks,
scale.
looks a little bit more inviting, rather than a
approachable.
large
Yeah.
building.
This is another one of the spaces on Council on Aging, just looking at it from a different angle.
Yeah, sort of in the cafeteria slash, but the idea that space could be a pre-function space at night, if you're doing something in the auditorium, and then during the day, it's Council on Aging, they can move around, they can have coffee, it could even be like a servery, and then at night it closes up, or, there's a lot of flexibility in that. A separate, stretch and yoga component, for Council on Aging.
So what's interesting in this is we model this entire building, so every one of these spaces are real spaces inside this building that can be utilized for this. So this wasn't facetiously just drawn up. So this wall really exists there, we just blow out the wall and put more glass in there. So the heights are accurate and the walls are accurate. We wanted to show more that you can convert some of this space rather than, that you can't. So this is right now,
It's
the
out back.
backside.
Back, yeah.
And then convert it into, a bazaar, the farmer's market, any type of event space, right? I mean, and we went back and forth on, do you make permanent structures or carols, or is it something that's leased or time shared, or, it depends on how, but I think the opportunity could be, it could take on any type of role there, but that's the idea. Take it, make it into a place that you could come and the community could engage. I think the outdoor market, and then in the very far, the end, we cut a hole and you go in and you could have an indoor market. So in winter, if it's nasty, it might be smaller, but you still could have a place for, an indoor sales and
Right now, the annex houses the winter market.
winter market,
Inside,
yeah,
and then the summer market outside and around it.
yeah. Yeah, oh. That's what is that, the cricket? We call that the cricket? It just sometimes,
Concession stand.
it's a folly, but a concession, a restroom, something that gives back a little bit more than having to come into the building, when you're out in the public, out in the field, the school's using the field on the weekends. Again, who takes control of that and cares for it? We don't know yet, but it would be something that you can offer,
Command and control, so you don't have people playing the fields and just walking through the building,
Yeah.
Right.
not doing everything they want to do, so.
More realistically, what they did is they had one porta potty
Porta-john, yeah.
Porta-john.
Yeah.
It's a fancy porta-john.
Yeah, I'm talking about what was there before, when you had soccer, practices, you'd have like 400 kids.
Yeah.
And one porta-john.
One porta-john.
Right.
So,
Baking in the sun.
So maybe that's increased.
yeah,
So, I mean, again, it's just, that's the idea behind it, like really think about how that outdoor space is used and who's coming to it.
Just as a general comment, I'd be curious, I'm sure this is part of the analysis, but just as a general comment, I'd be curious, the space with that campus model versus the previous model, the demolished space, obviously that's now less space to renovate. How does that cost compare to the demolition cost for that space, right? I'd just be curious on that piece.
I can tell you, if you don't want to look ahead, there's a difference of about $6 million between
Okay.
Scheme 3 and Scheme 2, and the difference is
Yeah.
a lot of the outside elements. So
Which
demolition,
one
You're
is,
still
which one is
demoing.
more?
3,
Three.
naturally, because there's a lot more hardscape
Right,
you're adding
right.
to that. And every time I cut a wall down, now I have an opening.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
I
yeah,
Put a
yeah.
wall up,
Yeah.
Yeah.
stuff like that. But they're very, I'm kind of giving away the prize at the end, but they're very similar, and we'll go into that. That's why a lot of things you don't see in these schemes are a lot of the elements that are baked into this building that you won't see. Air conditioning, ventilation. You know, like that building has no ventilation right now. So the ventilation that was designed in that building originally was the single pane windows. And it's really ventilation. If you go with cold air, you feel like the air come in, but it's realistically now you want to put weather-tight windows, now you have no ventilation. So now you got to bring ventilation. All that stuff costs a lot of money. This next option 4, it takes the existing site plan of the town hall, you're putting an addition on the back. That would take the area of the annex that now occupies the annex to this existing town hall.
And really nothing at the high school. So this is a divorced scheme in a sense from focusing on the high school building. But could you take the annex and build on here and renovate this as well? And, you know, so if that was, because there are other comments like, oh, we can't lose the town center, or, you know, like, what would we do with it? Well, you could convert that into housing as well, like, you know, blasphemy, but, you know, the town center could move somewhere else and still survive, but,
Now, do you have a cost analysis of this at the end
Yes.
as well? Okay.
yeah. So this is maintain it, do some type of an addition. We tried to do a cool glassy box, but knew that wasn't gonna fly.
Something a little bit more respected, I guess, to the architecture.
Of what's here,
Historic may
what
give
it
you
looks like.
a hard time with this one. Historic would prefer a glass box next to the existing. I'm not sure the public will, but that's certainly what
They kicked me off the Historic Review Commission now, so. Kidding.
So there's these building entrances. So this one
Yeah.
creates different entrances where only 2 exist now. You would have a third entrance there. Okay, so what we've done now is we've looked option 1, pros and cons. So I'm going to put these all up.
Yeah.
And we try to do this is normally in our business, you do this anyway to find out which one is better. And you try to, you know, capitalize on more pros than cons and be totally, you know, equal. And we had several people join us in the conference room when we did this. So it wouldn't just be Mason and Andrew saying, I like this one better, let's load this thing up with the pros. It was people around the office. We went in there, we all analyzed the stuff, and we gave our pros and cons, and we came up with some good solutions either way. And if you want to take a second and read those,
This is the Ben Franklin method,
yes,
right?
always. This is what's going to generate your ideas.
Right.
Why'd you do what you did? Well, there's different factors of why we did what we did. And certainly, this is a working meeting tonight. If we miss something, or you guys can think of something else, we'll certainly log that down, and you'll see it incorporated, so that's the idea.
And we tried to keep them pretty simple, so, because I tend to talk too much.
I don't see how option 4 is a separate option, because you still have to address what you can do at the high school.
Yeah, option 4, it kind of combines with option 1. I mean, the town can do absolutely nothing right now and just put an addition onto the town
So
hall.
it's really a 1 and 1A,
Could be.
okay?
Yeah.
But you got to address the town hall if you do option 1.
Yes.
So it's really part of option 1. Okay.
Right now, they're not addressing the existing high school. They're doing is paying for utilities. So they're not addressing,
Right.
you should address option 1 code-wise for liability, if anything else. Protect the interests of the overall town.
Well, and I think also that if the sentiment was that we don't do anything with the high school, we still need to put money into the annex and the town hall, and we're not talking about council on aging at all, so it's kind of like, I don't know, it's a backup plan. If no one's gonna support X dollars, will they support X dollars for this building?
Well, let's face it, I mean, the annex at some point will crumble. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, it's barely usable as a building now for people to access every day with traffic every day. So at some point, that has to be dealt with, and if you have a perfectly good bone structured building sitting there, then you have to include it in the conversation. as
Right.
to- So I agree with Ed that it's like 1 and 1A. 1 and 4 really do go together. That if you do nothing, you still have to deal with the annex at some point. But it has nothing to do with the school.
Right.
I understand from your standpoint, it kind of culps it out, but
Right.
it's still part and parcel
I don't-
the same.
I personally don't like it, but I see that you might need to think about it, right? You need to,
Well, I think people need to see that it still costs money. I mean,
Yes,
if you
exactly.
do nothing, if you tear that building down, it's gonna cost a lot of
You're
money.
understating the cost of option A,
Right.
option one.
yes. yeah,
Right.
yeah.
My gut tells me, on option one, you've got an operating expense number. I would think you need operating expense and capital for each of the choices. Because I think it's unfair to say, well, it costs $350,000 a year to operate that, and not talk about the cost to operate the other choices.
Yeah, I think,
It's a balanced
if
choice.
Right.
I think that's Mr. Reese brings up a good point. A number of residents have brought that to my attention as well.
Right.
That, you know, the cost of the annual cost of maintenance for the existing buildings is one thing, but if we know, for example, that there's a large capital expense needed in the near future, that's certainly a consideration too, right? If there's well, the annex is going to need $1 million worth of upgrades in the next 5 years.
Right.
Then that's certainly an important consideration as
Right.
part
Or
of
if
it.
the well fails one more time, there's no more space.
Right, exactly.
you know,
And we've had
for the
issues with
well.
that recently, so
Right.
that's certainly a concern.
Right.
But that automatically inflates the cost of, so now you're dealing with the demolition costs of the building or the mothball costs with that building.
Right.
In addition to the maintenance costs, which continue to grow, as well as the capital needs.
Yeah, and the inefficiencies of those buildings, right?
Right.
That the heat just goes out the window, right?
And I think, to your earlier point of wanting a little bit of direction beyond this, so if we get past, or get to the next slide here, this is the big one, right? So, we can talk a little bit about how to incorporate those costs, whether it's operation costs, capital costs, into the final presentations or the final conversations with the public meetings. I think that's important. So, for example, if for option 4, 1A, include the cost of the, like a demolition of the high school building, for example. So,
Yeah, we did not put that in. This is sort of especially on option 4, I didn't put in the operation and maintenance of the high school, I just focused on this,
Right,
understood, yeah.
right.
yeah.
But you can look at between 55, 59. In terms of $55 million, $4 million is less than 10%, and you get option 3. So that's where you get the beneficial use. What is that factor you're looking for? Is it worth spending the other $4 million over a 30-year bond, which is nothing, and then benefit from all that exterior function of that use, or is it better just to keep the building at $55 million and renovate it? Like I said earlier, a lot of the cost goes into renovating that existing and bringing that up to code with finishes or whatnot, and you're saving some of that structure. Now, to give everyone an idea of scale, we're doing a 57,000 square foot new building. It's an aviation center, so it's very much a big open area. There are some offices, and it's $53 million for that one building. So when you're talking about a structure that's 3 times the size of that for the same price, you can start to see the cost savings.
Of the
in
infrastructure.
that
So what,
structure.
yeah, just out of curiosity, what's the cost per square foot on that?
800.
800, that one is
Yeah,
800?
yeah.
Okay, wow.
So they're going about $700 to $800 a foot with, it's towns, so you got to pay union, prevailing wage. So that's where you see the renovation cost down at half that price, because you're saving a lot of that structure. So if you use it as a relative term, and I don't want to sound like a car salesman, but it's actually a pretty good deal for what you're getting for the square footage, for what you're doing and what you're renovating in the town and the building size. It's a big building you're renovating and creating a lot of elements for that cost.
And this isn't looking at, we have the number, but the idea of escalation, right, and inflation, and any type of contingency, this is not, we carry 10%, but is that realistic? That's gonna go up 10 to 12% per year, right? Easily. We've seen that happen, so.
We've been using 4 to 6% on average with inflation, less tariffs. So depending on what the tariffs do, how that affects the construction industry, if it affects it, if they're gonna keep kicking the can, we don't know that yet. So all we can assume is 4 to 6% like it has been. Materials have been coming down, labor's been pretty much equalizing, so we don't see that really going up that much like it has in the last decade, unless something drastic happens.
One question on the cost for option 3. Now, that is taking into consideration 3 separate systems for each, or set of systems for each component, is that correct? Okay.
Yeah, but if you look at option 2, it's very similar, because in a newer building, you don't want one system for the entire building. You'll spend more money trying to control that system than you will if you had 3 different operating systems that are more efficient. for the time of
Okay,
day.
so that's actually, I
Very
guess,
similar.
one question that I would have as far as the operation cost would option 3 actually be a significant savings on operation cost because of the separate systems? But if you're telling me that's
They'd
not
be very
necessarily-
similar.
Okay.
Because you'd put them all on, I put them on control modules, so that town hall shuts off at 4 o'clock, temperature goes way down, 4 o'clock, this one goes back up at this time. Where right now, the system is on, off. So very, very inefficient for the square footage you're using. I'd use variable frequency drives, which means that on the south side of the building where the sun, at daylight today, it's gonna crank those air-conditioned motors a lot faster. So on the north side, it'll be a lot less. You save a lot of energy that way. So you're creating that smart building that looks at the environment outside, inside, and the potential use on it. All those, both scheme 2 and 3 have those built into it. The big difference between 3 and 2 would be the hardscape on the outside and the structure you're creating by cutting off, and then the demolition cost of taking that building down.
And there's nothing in the budget for furnishings and fixtures.
FF&E things, we did have that, we have a line item, but not specific.
We can break it out if you want.
Yeah.
You
Okay, I
say
just wanted to make
9%.
sure there wasn't another $2 million
Oh.
for desks and chairs in there.
No, what isn't in here, you get an inflation factor we'll put in. The eventual one's gonna have the inflation factor, and if you want, we'll separate the FF&E out of it.
Okay.
So you can see that. So we figured the senior center, they take a lot of their elements over initially, they get a lot of grants, they'll be able to buy it. The same with the town hall, they'll take some of their elements over, but not all of their elements over. They're dealing with a lot of antiquated stuff. Furniture like this, which is new, you obviously.
Brand new.
Bring it right over. You wouldn't have to reuse that again in some of the chairs.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I'm going to ask our State House person here. I had been to an MMA meeting about a year ago, Mass Municipal Association meeting. And they had indicated that there were some rumblings in the State House that they were going to try to adopt a bill, or someone was going to put forth a bill that would have a financing element similar to what they have for school buildings for municipal offices, because this is a chronic problem throughout the state, that many, many town halls are deteriorating, municipal buildings, non-education municipal buildings are in crumble. And towns don't have, because of Prop 2.5, towns don't have the resources to be able to fix them or build new ones. And that they were gonna do the same dedicated type of tax, the same way the SBA, the school building assistance, is funded now. It's like 1/4 of 1% of the sales tax.
That bill was presented we had a meeting at Fall River City Hall a few months ago.
And it was, did it
was
die?
an MMA meeting, and
Yeah.
they presented the legislation that would in effect mirror the MSBA.
Which would be fabulous. I mean, if we could get some
I'm
recovery.
not sure where the bill is.
Yeah, that's what I'm, you're at the State House, so keep your eyes open
Yeah,
for
I'm
something
not sure where the
like
bill
that.
is either. I know there is certainly a push for particularly on the capital front right now. Actually, there's a hearing on a bill the other day about, in addition to that legislation, specific to capital needs for higher education. So that's getting like a dedicated fund that's separate from what they would normally get through the general fund. So
Right.
there is movement in that area.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure where it's at right now, but
Yeah.
it is
How long do we-
increasingly becoming part of the conversation, yeah.
Right, that would be,
The legislature is just getting through the budget process, and we're year one of a two-year cycle, so I just anticipate that some of this stuff is gonna sort of lay around,
yeah,
have some initial hearings,
yeah.
and then we'll be.
It'll take a while to get some legs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So keep an
But
ear
that,
out.
actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the questions that I did have is, for municipalities that have done projects like this, what sort of funding mechanisms have you seen, in addition to just going out to the town for a debt exclusion? What have you seen
State
to
grants.
lower that?
Yeah, state
Right,
grants.
okay. Yeah.
We've done two of them, I don't know, second one in the state of Rhode Island, where they see the beneficial use of some of the structure. And I'm trying to convince a third town to do it right now. And like I said, we did a white paper that describes stats around the country and what the trend is around the country doing that. And you can't, with prices rising the way they are, so I'm old enough to say I remember $125 a square foot for a building cost. Now we're up to 800. So in one person's career, it never should go 8 times. Certainly, John, in your career, when you had done it, prices didn't inflate 8 times.
I don't know anything anymore.
So it's incredible what's happening. And a lot has to do with technology. So technology improves, like right now, you have a classroom. The classroom's nothing like it was designed even in the 80s. It's very, very different. So they're bringing a lot more technology. There's a lot more technology used for systems and life systems. And so they're looking now at how do you use these buildings for not just 8 to 4 anymore, how to use them 24 hours a day, and how can they be utilized that way so you get the full maximum use. You know, historically, school buildings were always used 8 in the morning, 2:30 in the afternoon, and then the janitor was there till 5, and then they locked them up. So underutilized type of area where you had to keep the heat on all day long, but you only utilized the building 6 hours a day. Now they're looking at how do you use these buildings in more hours to get that beneficial use out of it. And this would be an example of that.
If I could ask one more question, Mr. Chair. So you mentioned earlier that, that one of the considerations with an option 2 would be that you're potentially spending money to heat or cool areas that may be or underutilized, right? So could you expand on that a little bit?
So when we priced this thing up, we talked about what do you do with that 20,000 square feet that you're not utilizing on that first floor? How do you have to condition it, you have to heat it. So if I make the system to the left, which is utilized 1.5 times larger, then it's not as efficient. So now I have to have its own system. And that system would be designed to keep that temperature at a lower rate until it's used and modified. So there's a cost there that you wouldn't have in Scheme 3.
Right.
That's why they're very close, because you're doing the same things to the building. And 1.3 adds a lot more to the outside, and obviously when you cut something, you gotta cap it.
We normally call it white boxing space in a building where you come in and you finish it off to a level, but you know there's no tenant, but you can't let it freeze. You don't need to heat it to the same extent. But the systems that adjoin it need to be of large enough capacity that if it ever is occupied, it can be turned over pretty quickly, right? It can be, or the heating system could accommodate that space if it is absorbed into function, but.
So the value of that's usually 70, 100.
Right.
So 70% of the building's built out for a white box, the other 30% is the tenant improvements, so the TI. So this case, you do the same thing. So you're buying that 70% investment in an area you don't have any occupation for it in the future. So it's up to the town at that point to try to occupy it, or try to design it in a way where maybe it has its own egress and entrance, or to just cut it out, use it for something else.
So at this point, first of all, thank you for the comprehensive report here.
Before you stop, can I just interject one
You
quick
go
thing?
very quickly, yes.
We have a guest here who I invited, Hank Keating, who is a very experienced architect, lives in town, who I dragged into this thing. So I'm going to, if you could, give him a couple minutes. You got any comments?
I do have some comments and questions, yes. As John said, I'm an architect. and-
Can you, yeah, I'm sorry, could ask you to come to it, yeah.
Yes, so I'm an architect, retired developer of affordable housing, 40 years of development work. And I've lived in town now for 10 years. I'm a newcomer, and I haven't been super involved. I read shorelines. And from that, I take generally that this is a town that is very reticent to fund large projects. And that's a tendency that at some point needs to be overcome to solve these problems. And I'm interested in how you prepare the presentation of this information in the best light possible. And what I'm missing in the picture right now, and it may be deep in your document somewhere, is effectively it seems you need to have a needs assessment, capital needs assessment for this building, for the annex building, and operating numbers for this building and that building, and the same as you have now for the school. And you have to set those baselines so that you can compare them to what you're going to finally get, because the capital needs assessment 5 and 10 years on this building and that building are probably going to be very significant.
So to that point, I actually wanted to, that's kind of where I wanted to go with the discussion, because I think, I know you all at this point were looking for a little bit of direction. So in reviewing the options that you have here, there's two things that come to mind immediately. The first thing is, which of option 2 or option 3 would be the most easily phased in? Bless you.
If I could, Chris, could I, your first name, John?
Hank.
Hank, sorry. Could I just address? So-
Yes,
one-
but right before you do that, I did want to, what I wanted to direct certainly you all to do at the end of the day is a cost per square foot analysis of operations for every town building, including the Council on Aging, because the key, beyond the great uses and renderings and everything, the key to this study, in my mind, has always been the cost-benefit analysis. So if we are able to take a look at this number, the number for option 2 or option 3, it looks like a large number, but if you put that up against, to your point, the capital costs that are going to be necessary on this building, the annex, and the Council on Aging, and also the operating costs, and break it down, I think the best way to present this to the town is literally breaking it down by a per square foot cost for operations and capital. That's kind of my thought, so.
So Hank introduced two ideas. One was how much does it cost to currently operate the existing buildings? We used that in the last presentation, so we do have that data.
Great.
Oh, I'm sorry. So we looked at the cost to operate all the buildings in its current state. We have not done yet projecting.
Yeah.
And we have not done, taken a look at the well on the annex and say, how much is it going to make another well? And if that well doesn't work, what do we do now? We haven't done that yet. That's part of your cost analysis. And then we haven't provided that in the next 10 years. That'll be the next step as you project that the next 10 years. So that you can do a square footage analysis plus the cost incorporating into that. Now, the answer to the other question that Hank had is, how do you sell this to the town? So it isn't as much as selling it is, you convince the town the benefit it has to the different populations in the town. So a lot of times when you go for a bond vote for a school, you're only really benefiting the parents of young children. The people that are trying to retire and live here are worried about their taxes going up and them taxing them out of their house, where the people that don't have any children are worried about being taxed for not even having kids in the system. So what you do is you assemble what I call, in term they use the bundle bond, was when you address every population in that bond. So everyone has the beneficial use of that bond, and they can see the benefit for themselves of why that's important for them to vote for this. And that's kind of our strategy into doing that. And that was kind of the premise of, if you look at some of the spaces, like in option 3 and 2, it really addresses the younger population, the older population, the middle population, the people that like arts, people that like sports, the people that like exterior activities, the people that like exterior sports. It addresses all those people. And in the hopes that everyone comes around the table and says, this is a great idea for the community. It's something you want to build a community for. So,
There's also an element of more than one opinion that I've heard.
Ms. Brown,
We should just,
grab your mic, sorry.
there's also an element that I've heard from on more than one occasion. We should just sell it. We should just sell the property. And I think that cost also needs to be addressed, because a lot of people will see that as a large piece of property, but once you peel off the layers, you realize it's very wet. The number of house lots that could be produced there are very small in number that you could produce. And how much are you really going to get for a piece of land that could only have, I'm going to pull the number out, 10 house lots, maybe 12, with a building on it that's going to cost $3.5 to $4 million to. But I don't think people would automatically go to those other layers. So if that could be addressed as well, that it's like, okay, the do nothing
yeah.
and sell it, because doing nothing doesn't mean that doing nothing, I mean, we're going to literally watch it just crumble to the ground. Doing nothing means you're going to dispose of it at some point, one way, shape, or form. So that demolition of doing nothing, because you're not going to mothball it for nothing. I mean, you have to have an intent if you're going to mothball it. So I think people need to understand that the value of that land is far greater to the town than it is to anyone else. We have fields that if we did sell that, we now have to redevelop fields elsewhere. And there's a cost associated with that. And the amount of money we would receive to sell that land is minimal when you think about the improvements that are on the land currently that someone else would have to deal with. So I think that we can't ignore that in selling it and selling any proposal, that we have to make sure we address that. Because there are a lot of people that say, oh, we should just sell that. Just get rid of it. Just get rid of the whole thing and move on, take the money. Because the appraisal that was initially done about 4 years ago now, said it was worth $12 million. We would love it if somebody walked in the door with half that amount of money. No one's going to walk in with a check for that amount of money for that property. So sure, on paper, it might be worth that based on the square footage, but based on its true use and the value it is to the town, I think it's far greater than that. So I think just a paragraph that, or a comparison that includes that cost of doing nothing would also include, well, if you sell it, it's not going to be worth very much. You know, you're not going to get a big return for it. And now you need to find another spot for your fields, and the cost of producing those fields
Correct,
is
Right, right.
$3-4 million.
Last time we were,
at least.
maybe when we met, there was a discussion that the town already either owns or bought the rights to buy a piece of property?
Yeah, well,
The campground.
Yeah, there's a former campground
Campground.
property that's adjacent to the new high school building.
Okay.
There was it's not developed right now.
Right.
There's a structure there, but it's not, the land would have to be completely redeveloped in
Yeah,
order
so
to
there-
use it.
It
But that
needs to be
study was
cleared, right.
conducted
It needs to be
probably
completely
about 10
cleared.
years, almost 10 years ago.
Yeah, but it's
Yeah.
$4 or $5 million to develop
Right.
those fields
Right,
there.
right.
So you're not going to get that in recovery from the land.
Right.
So I think that we need to just address that in any public presentation, that the do-nothing part would include probably selling the land, because you're not going to just do nothing and watch it,
And what does
the
that?
bats come in and out of it, right? I mean,
Right.
Yeah.
Or becomes a liability for the.
yeah, sure.
Just to throw one more grenade out into the middle of the thing here. Way back when I first got involved in this thing, there was a discussion, and I remember the former superintendent came to one of our meetings and talked about, well, you know, we might need that building 5 years down the road. Now, I don't know where that stands. And the idea was that the town was going to grow.
No.
And we
No.
would-
The bottom line is no.
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 That's not happening.
You know, that's.
That is not part of
That
the.
is just not, yeah,
It's-
it's not happening.
Well,
It's not happening or not being considered.
I do not believe that's part of the scope of this work, but I can tell you, it's also not happening. Just, there's, the time.
School committee members.
Yeah. The time of that building being a school building, full-time school building, is come and gone. And then
And
there's
why do you
just
say that?
a myriad of reasons we have been over time and time again, and I'd really like to move on because it's just not an option. Like, we've,
Before I head out, I've come to some previous meetings on this topic, and one thing I would caution you against, which has been kicked around earlier in the meeting, is when do you hit a change of use?
Yeah.
Therefore, a change of code update threshold. I know there's been a bit of a tendency, I've heard at meetings say, we can just move in, and it's not going to be a problem. Certainly, I think the irony is an after-school program for kids, it's probably not a change of use. But is that the population you want to expose to a building that's not up to code? That's kind of ironic. Then administrative office for the school, sure, that's not going to be challenged as a change of use. But beyond that, I think the town would be kidding themselves, or the people who think that way would be kidding themselves if they didn't recognize you're going to hit a change of use door, and that's going to bring about a huge amount of costs.
Yeah.
well, and I think to your point, that is why we need to, move forward as quickly as we can with the study part here, because I do think the Council on Aging, I understand the want and the urgency to get in and use it immediately, but those are considerations we have to take, the town has to take into consideration at this point, and I think, so, I do have the same concerns about where that trigger is also, even when you talk about the percentage of the building being utilized. One thing I think that, go.
Just wanted to note on that, I know that this committee wasn't included on that prior to it happening. I don't remember this committee discussing that before it was done, but I would at least hope the town administrator has been included in that, if the building is being used beyond what it was before.
So I can actually not speak to that directly.
Or the select board or
actually
somebody,
do not.
just so that somebody is at least aware of.
To the best of my knowledge, there is some awareness. I know there's certainly, I know that the facilities director and the Council on Aging director, there was a meeting and a walkthrough, I believe, that was set up by the town administrator. That's a very good point. We should probably follow up on.
I don't recall any programming going on in that facility for the Council on Aging.
So
It was an idea that's been.
it's an idea that's being explored, and there was an urgency.
So there isn't
I
currently
guess,
any.
but to my knowledge, there's not
Okay.
currently. However, again, I know that there's
If I'm wrong, in the building itself, the only two uses are the after-school program and the town recreation program, in addition to pre-existing uses for school administration office.
That's my understanding.
I think, well, and there are uses, the gym and the auditorium are used on
Yeah,
occasion
well,
as well. But that's still, both of those would be pre-existing
I'm
as
not
well.
even sure the
so.
auditorium's used.
No. that's
No,
not-
I think the gym is being used, and it's fairly active, and that's one of the issues, that if you get rid of that, you have a program that's gonna be stranded, and it's a fairly well-used program. It's also the same facilities that are being used for the after-school program. Both would not have a home.
Yeah.
Now, there is probably some sporadic use of the grounds, I mean, from time to time, but that hasn't been linked to use of the building itself.
I just want to
And the-
clarify, because that was brought up a few
The police
times,
department,
I
I
just
believe,
wanted
have
to.
used it for training, tactical training, on occasion. They've had training inside the building, like school resource officer type training, invader, intruder type training, for school buildings in there, but that's
Probably,
sporadic.
I could see maybe scenario training because
Yeah,
of.
yes, that type of thing.
What do you call it, active shooter drill. You don't
Exactly.
want to go in, it's a way of doing it during the day.
Of course,
Yeah, but I'm thinking in terms of
regular use.
regular use where the general public is going in to use that facility. I think it's just 2 or the three purposes I alluded to.
And voted.
Right.
So, very quickly, I did want to mention, I believe Mr. Hartner was not able to be with us tonight, or today, well, I guess tonight by now, but he did send an email to you all with his thoughts, and I know that there was a couple of questions on costs, demolition costs, things like that. So I just wanted to make sure that you were able to see that and
Yes, we did.
incorporate that. Okay, excellent, excellent. And one of the questions, just for the record, that the town administrator had is what would be the costs associated with the COA moving in for programming immediately? And I think that the code issues are certainly something that need to be addressed immediately, I think, if possible. So not to cut off discussion necessarily, but I just do want to ask you all exactly what are you looking for as far as direction going forward now, from where we are to.
So if we're on the right track, that's the first and foremost, right? The second one is we've taken all your comments and we've written them down, and we're going to
Our
incorporate them.
select board chair did opine on that last point. She texted me saying, the COA was talking to Kim being the facilities manager for the school department about renting space in the building. They may have signed a lease like the rec people do, but that's a may, so that's something we need to nail down.
And we can figure that out through, if, I don't, to my knowledge, they have not executed an agreement, but we'll take a look at that, okay.
But
Sorry, is that the process to lease it or rent it to someone? Is that what?
the council on aging was talking to the school's facility manager about renting space in the building. They may have signed a lease like the rec people do, but the rec people are
There's-
still,
yeah,
that's a
There's
pre-existing.
currently like it's like essentially a usage form that goes out for, if it's the rec league, but that's for temporary use. So what I wasn't sure on, based on what was mentioned, if it was the moving in of programming on a consistent basis, or if it was, a temporary use, which,
That's, we'll have to.
I just
get some-
wasn't sure on that.
And
But it needs to be clarified.
it does need to be clarified. I will also mention, separately from this business, the school committee is looking at a comprehensive review of facility use guidelines, facility use rentals and whatnot. So we'll definitely follow up and make sure that if something is happening on that front, can make sure you all are aware of it as soon as possible. So, Mr. Gendro.
So just as a general, I just wanted to say, I think the process that you've outlined so far has been thoughtful and takes in at least what I had envisioned based on the conversations that, we had substantial input at the public meeting that we had. A lot of folks were able to speak and voice their opinion, and I think that this incorporates that accurately based on the different options that you've put forward, and I look forward to seeing the final with the incorporation of what we discussed tonight. Certainly on top of that, but certainly can appreciate the direction that you've taken it so far, and I think it's a good reflection of the voice of the town, at least from the comment that we solicited at the meeting.
Yeah, I agree. I think showing the various schemes is valuable, very valuable, to having people being able to visualize what could be versus thinking in their head all of nothing but dollar signs. Having pretty pictures to show this is what it could look like, and this is the efficiency that could be achieved by doing these things, I think is exactly what we need to be able to show the public and have their determination at the ballot box ultimately, but I think that would be very helpful.
So what we'd like to do is have maybe one more virtual meeting with you all to develop what we've just talked about today, give you that last look, and then we should plan on a public meeting and where you want that public meeting to be and how you want to advertise it. And that'll be more of the same with probably some of those other final comments you have to kind of tweak the final list. So,
First of all, thank you. I was very impressed with your work.
thanks.
It feels like we have some direction. But it feels to me that this work needs a front end of a marketing presentation. That people go, I get it. I'm not sure the way we have it now we will move a town meeting through it to a good conclusion. I think it has to be presented in a way that we almost ask rhetorical questions. What happens if we don't do anything? This is what happens if we don't do anything. Why can't we move people in? This is why we can't move people in. To make it really accessible, so that people aren't being caught in detailed analysis of, walls and HVAC systems. Because I think this is very good, what we have, but I think it needs a marketing perspective at the front end.
Okay, good comments. Great. We do that.
Just to carry off that agreement, are you just envisioning one more public meeting, do y'all think, or is it too early in the
Probably
process?
one with this group, and then we would imagine the last one would be the big public. And then, at that point, you got to decide, I think you go with the selectmen decide, they go to a town
Okay.
meeting before they go to a bond vote.
Okay, yeah,
Those next steps, we could certainly help you with the bond, getting that bond. It would be more the same of this,
Yeah.
but putting it in different type of public meetings
Yeah.
and promoting it more towards where the question actually comes up.
so the select board will decide eventually, so with this next public meeting, what kind of feedback are we trying to garner from folks? And are you envisioning this like in July? Just because I thought it was a really successful public meeting last time, and I'd love for this one to be bigger and more engaging in a different way that's just a presentation, like
Right.
maybe like pop-up model building or something like that. So just wanted to get y'all's feedback.
So I envision in a couple of weeks having another virtual meeting.
Yep,
Virtual because we could do it anytime, any place, and I know, and I appreciate you guys coming, I mean, and I know how difficult, especially 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
you
it's
guys
very
too.
difficult, so,
yeah.
That, we do that, we get paid for that, so we have to be here, so you guys do it for free, want to be here, there's a difference.
We had to walk together, no.
Oh my gosh,
Just about.
would be faster.
So we see, a couple of weeks, you see another virtual meeting again where we can take those comments like you had and like you all have and try to incorporate those in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And get those up. And then I'm sure there'll be more comments, and that's when you schedule the other one, which will
Okay.
probably be a month from that.
Okay, so maybe August, because I'm thinking, okay, like I don't want folks to come and maybe after, if that's the last one, there's a bit of fatigue. You can only do this annual town meeting stuff like 6 months out. So then it's like August, but then thinking about the full timeline of when like action can be taken. So I was just curious because I'm going to be thinking about this public meeting because I want to reach a lot of folks. So
So if in
we
2
can
weeks.
discuss.
Yeah, today's the 5th, so
Yeah.
2 weeks would be the 19th.
Okay,
After that, you could do right after mid-July.
Yeah.
I don't know what vacation schedules are, if you get more people from the public in July versus August versus September. So we should think about that.
Another thought. The thought is, this was a problem, I mentioned this to a few after the last public meeting. We need somebody who is a skilled moderator and/or facilitator to lead that discussion.
And
This committee should be sort of like the hearing officers, listening, maybe asking questions, but to lead a discussion and be part of the discussion is, it's not a conflict of interest, but it's a conflict of roles. And if we're trying to, if you look at a moderated meeting or a facilitated meeting, you have somebody who does that or is good at it, or it could be somebody we don't have to pay, but it could be somebody we have to pay. And then they let the folks that are representing the various departments and interests around this table to stay in their role and not to try to play a larger role in a meeting like that.
I agree, absolutely. And I also think the location, if we're going to do it in the old high school, which I think in this case, do the auditorium, we'll keep it a little.
A little more formal.
I think a little bit more formal, exactly.
okay.
But
Perhaps
Yeah.
our former town moderator would be interested in moderating.
indeed, that is certainly a
We had
possibility.
We had a facilitator that we hired.
Mr. Kirk?
We
didn't
did.
use her.
Well, we used her, but
We didn't get
we
anybody else.
we didn't
Highly
have.
recommended. I
Yeah.
was the one that pushed to it, because I've used facilitators.
And when we had the event, unfortunately, we only had a few people. I don't think we had a quorum with that. So, one thing I am curious about as far as timing, Would it be better to go towards August or September for a public meeting at this point? I go back and forth. I don't know. I don't know how July looks for attendance prospects, you know?
I agree with that.
But I
At
also,
the same time, timeline is also a consideration. I don't
It
know
is,
if
yes.
sitting on this for a few more months when there's momentum is
you know,
that's a concern of mine.
that's kind of the,
Good or bad, Evan? What do you think?
I think that's I'm just not sure how long we should sit on it
Yeah.
and wait when we have momentum behind it. There was clearly interest.
Yeah.
At the last meeting, there's momentum, and as this report's being developed, I just feel that if we wait too long, that it's, I don't know, it might lull again.
I'm gonna ask-
And then you're working maybe equally as hard to revamp that interest again at that time, as opposed to doing it closer to when the last one was.
I want to ask a loaded question. When was the last time there was a special town meeting here? It's been,
It's usually in October of, I think the last one we had was in
it was
October.
October, yeah.
Yeah.
So when was the last special town meeting?
Was that
It was a few
It's been a
years
while,
ago.
it's been,
No, not really.
It was like 4 years, maybe?
Has it been since the
had to
pandemic?
be more
I
than
think
that.
maybe
Was it
before.
the pandemic?
I want to say it was October.
It's been a while.
If you use the middle of July, like if you use the week after the 4th comes on a Friday, the weekend after, or the week after, if people are taking that long week after
Yeah,
that,
no,
the
that-
following week,
Those 2 weeks are shot.
right, so you do the week of the 15th, which is a month and 2 weeks, which is a month after we want to meet virtual. So that momentum would keep up. It would be the middle of July. I know you guys are a beach community, so people usually come down here to, get away from the city, so.
Okay.
I agree with
I-
that about the momentum. I mean, I think that people are waiting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they won't, yeah.
And have been for years.
Yeah,
So-
yeah. I mean, it could go either way, right? It's like they've been waiting, what difference does it make? But you never, there's never going to be the ideal time,
Yeah.
right? There will always be someone.
Well, and the other consideration, the reason I was mentioning the special meeting is I don't want to lose the momentum on the other end of that
Yeah.
either. So if we're waiting until, next May.
Yeah.
That they forget by the time it.
Exactly, so, but I think, for this,
But
this,
You still run into that too, even if you have the public meeting in the fall, because then you're waiting until the
then
next.
you're waiting
spring
until,
time.
exactly, so like either way,
So
yeah,
what we've
it's-
done
that's-
is you go to different events. You go to the soccer game on the weekends and you have boards.
Yeah,
You go to the basketball games, you go to the town meetings, and you don't give such a large presentation. You just give a question and answer. You have all the propaganda up, and then they come out and ask questions. You keep in their face that way. You come out with a mailer. The mailer goes out to everyone's houses, reminding them of what's coming and the benefits that it all has. Those are all techniques that you can do that'll bring you right up to that time when you vote.
There's certainly a marketing component that, and I think that's important to, in some parts of the presentation, especially the public presentation. I do also think the nuts and bolts here are crucial, obviously, as well. So it's just, I know you guys kind of have a balancing act as far as the public
Yeah,
meeting
sure.
goes, but I do like the idea of having a follow-up in a couple of weeks virtually, just to see where we're at. I will say it again, I've said it 1,000 times, I'll say it again, the ultimate thing that I think is going to make a difference is that cost-benefit analysis. I think that is just seeing how much we're going to spend anyway versus what we're going to spend, what we
Doing
could
anything.
spend and have all the goodies, I think is going to be a huge selling point for any marketing push or any decision that the town ultimately makes. I think that'll be crucial. So, at this time, I know we've been at it for a couple hours here. Does anybody have any members of the committee first, and then, or,
I'm just going
And
to
then
say thank you.
go right-
and head out.
oh, no, all right, thank you.
Thanks for meeting you.
Appreciate it, thank you.
I'll be behind you.
For coming.
So we, I think at this point, if we're going to set a virtual meeting, if it would be agreeable to the committee, I would like to try actually, no, maybe not a Wednesday. I know that our town administrator is going to be unavailable on Thursdays for the foreseeable future, so perhaps something on either the
18th?
I was thinking that, but two of us would be indisposed at the moment.
Well, it's at
First,
6:30, but before that is,
If it would, yeah, perhaps we could do another,
It's going to be a virtual.
it's a virtual, we could do another 4 o'clock on the 18th.
or 5 or
that's-
5:30, or
If you're, I'm cutting it a little close, you never know. So, we'll say 5 o'clock on the 18th. Does that work for,
What was the date again?
that would be the 18th, Wednesday, the 18th,
5 PM.
at 5 PM, virtual,
June or July?
of June.
Are we locking that in?
Sorry, that was in September.
That's a Wednesday, right?
That is a Wednesday, yes.
So next day's a holiday.
The next day is Juneteenth, yes. So that Thursday would not work. And I do think, especially for the next one, I would like to make sure that town administrator can attend. So would that work for you all, the 18th?
Absolutely, unless you guys, you're here, right?
Am I here? I'm
Yeah,
here.
yeah, we're here.
I'm alive, I guess.
God willing, as they say.
As
Yeah.
part of our agenda, we'll talk about the public meeting setup time and whatnot.
Yeah, that'll be one of our agenda items.
Absolutely. Okay, excellent.
Okay?
Chairman, can I send an email? Can I lock that in, that meeting time?
Yes, let's go ahead and lock that in. So I know everybody probably wants to get out of here. I just want to say thank you again. This is
No problem.
what, we're on the right track of, certainly what I was envisioning when we began this process. So thank you again, and we're going to finish up a couple things. We do have, a couple action items on minutes. Do we have minutes at the moment, or?
I
we-
don't
have the
I
copies.
think Dia was going to catch up with all of them.
You are
We've
gonna?
got 2 sets of minutes, yes.
Okay, do we,
2 sets.
One from Feb 27th, one from April 10th.
Yeah,
Should I,
Feb 26. She picked up the Feb 27.
do you have, because I didn't get a copy of those, so.
okay, I wasn't sure. Okay, I can share a copy now.
Okay, if
Yeah?
you can share the copy, I don't want to necessarily approve them just because nobody has seen them until right now, but let's send those out. We will absolutely have minutes to approve at the next meeting, for sure. So if you could send any outstanding minutes, including
Including today's,
including this
okay.
one, we'll make sure that is going to be the first agenda item so that we catch up a little bit and
Okay.
don't hear from Mr. Higgins. So with that being said, I believe so we've got the next meeting set, and with that, I think we're done with our action items. I have
Motion to adjourn.
second.
so moved. It's been so moved, it's been seconded. All those in favor?